Welcome to RHI Sociable City Interviews, where we meet with global thought leaders on nightlife and the social economy. Today we are here with Paul Sears, co-owner of the Hudson House Distillery, a historic building on the Hudson River in upstate New York, producing quality spirits and a unique event space with a boutique hotel. Before opening the distillery, Paul operated several New York City nightlife venues and restaurants in Manhattan. As president of the New York Nightlife Association, he assisted in creating the Nightlife Best Practices Guide and initiated one of the first nighttime economy studies. In 2012, Paul became a founding trustee of the New York City Hospitality Alliance, a New York City-based trade association and lobbying organization representing bars, cafes, lounges, nightclubs, and destination hotels. He served as RHI board co-chair and speaker at RHI events and also spoke at international nightlife conferences in Columbia and Ibiza, Spain.
Hey, Paul, it's great to see you. I hope things are well up in the Hudson.
Hudson House, things are great, Jim. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm great. Now, this is an interesting interview for me because we've known each other for a long time. We've traveled to Ibiza and other parts, and Cancun and other places outside of just the United States together, and we've experienced nightlife. But it's always been fascinating, and you have multiple chapters in your life. So maybe you could just give a brief snapshot, like a 10,000-foot snapshot of the evolution of your career.
Sure, Jim. So I graduated New York University Tisch School of the Arts with 2 Bachelor of Fine Arts. So I pretty much cemented my role in a position in some form of hospitality job, whether it was bartending or serving or ultimately managing and even a DJ at one point in my career. And I did that because I was really focused on trying to become a commercial director at the time. And it, of course, just like everybody else 30 years ago, hospitality really afforded you that opportunity to go out and make a living at night so you could live, but then, follow your dreams and passions during the day. And that's kind of what I followed. But I always had a knack for it. I always had a love for it. And no matter, if my career went in one direction with branding and creative work and being a commercial director, I always had an interest in restaurants, always, or nightlife venues. And then ultimately it morphed into nightclubs. I always wanted to have my own nightclub in New York City. And from there, it just kind of morphed into being an operator, being an advisor, being a consultant for many other businesses as well. Back in 2005, I kind of got thrown into the wolves by my good friend Robert Bookman. My venue, my nightclub Soul had just been nuisance abated by the police department for some frivolous stuff because they were trying to crack down on nightlife for God knows what. And, at that point, I joined the New York City Nightlife Association. And then at that point, it just, my activism just, that's when it all kicked off, and ultimately followed David Rabin's footsteps and became the president of that organization. When the New York State Restaurant Association was no longer happy with us as our own thematic chapter, they decided to end the relationship, and that's when I helped form the New York City Hospitality Alliance, which is, one of the first city-based trade associations for the hospitality industry. And I obviously within those years met you and got very heavily active in the work that RHI does. So, I mean, I think that's really a snapshot. I'm an owner operator. I call myself a serial entrepreneur because I've really only worked for myself. My latest baby, my latest venture is Hudson House and Distillery, which is 27.5 acres in the middle of Hudson Valley. And it's challenging because it's a lot of different businesses under one. And so it's really challenging in that respect, but I love every minute of it.
Yeah, no, that's great. Now, you mentioned you went from the Nightlife Association to Hospitality Alliance. It's a shift in theme and focus. What was underlying that? Because I know you did the nightlife assessment, one of the first in the world, actually, to evaluate the economic impact of nightlife. But then you transitioned to a Hospitality Alliance. And how did you change?
Quite political within our own ranks. So yes, City Nightlife Association on its own prior to becoming a subchapter of the New York State Restaurant Association did one of the first, if not the first, economic impact study for around nightlife and what that meant, what that means to a city. And we really wanted our elected officials to take notice that we weren't just, these crazy kids that opened up these places of business and couldn't be reached except, 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. No, we were a business, and we wanted to make sure people knew that we were a business and that we were serious. And so that economic impact study really started opening up doors. Well, what we found was that we were showing up to a lot of the same meetings at the New York State Restaurant Association. So what happened was the New York State Restaurant Association asked the Nightlife Association if they would like to join as a thematic chapter, not a geographical chapter, but a thematic chapter, so that if there were issues in Buffalo or Rochester or even Albany around nightlife and nightlife establishments, the Nightlife Association could go there, work with the members and talk to them, et cetera, et cetera. Well, at some point in 2011, our contract was coming to an end, and the powers to be at the New York State Restaurant Association up in Albany at the headquarters basically said, yeah, I don't think we want to continue this relationship. And I'll never forget this. I was up at a meeting in Cooperstown, which is where the board meeting was. And it was kind of something written out of like a Michael Lewis novel, where you have this back channel, over drinks the night before. Don't worry, we got your back. Think we have a way, blah, 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 blah. And then I go into the meeting and I get completely railroaded as the representing member of the New York State Nightlife Association, that chapter. And so I'll never forget that one of the members said, well, listen, if you guys don't stay in New York State Restaurant Association, what are you going to do? I said, what do you mean what we're going to do? We're going to have our own association. We still need to fight for our rights. And if we don't see eye to eye with you, we're going to start our own. Well, we basically, once we started our own and we created the New York City Hospitality Alliance, and it was really 5 of us that really started it. I mean, there really was just 5 core people that really got the wheels motion. And then we brought in Andrew eventually and all that. And then the rest of it is history. But once we opened New York City Hospitality Alliance and gained some momentum, I would say after year 3 or 4, there really wasn't much of a need for a New York State Restaurant Association office in the city of Manhattan, because that chapter had gone down to just about 0 and became very inactive, because we were just very, very determined, dedicated, and very serious about making sure that we were heard, not only in Albany, but also at City Hall.
Transferred the term from nightlife to hospitality, which is a larger umbrella of other businesses than just the after 10 p.m. crowd.
I mean, if you notice, there's been a paradigm shift between what really is nightlife versus, being the other 9 to 5, right? Nightclubs and bars and after hours, 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. But there's been a paradigm shift, because as the consumer has gotten a little bit more careful in terms of how they're spending that extra money, hospitality, it crosses over. So I don't believe that a restaurant is only competing with a restaurant anymore. I believe that bars and nightclubs are now competing with restaurants, because some people may think that that restaurant is going to be their night out, as opposed to, offering other experiences. So for us, we thought, well, the problems are basically the same, even though each individual portion of it and business out of it is a little bit different. So that's why we expanded.
So when was it that you first learned about RHI and our organization? Can you recall?
I do recall. Rob Bookman came back from an event that you guys had in San Francisco, and it was almost as if he had seen the second coming of Christ. Like, he found baby Moses in that river, and he was ready. I mean, we finally, it's not just us. There are other people with these problems. We're not alone. And that was basically what he brought back with him. And then right after that, he was able to convince you to do a 1-day seminar in New York City, with the working group that we had composed to create the New York City Nightlife Best Practices Guide. And within that working group, we invited other members of our community as well. I had a wonderful, wonderful day at the Standard Hotel with you. And that was really where it just started kind of clicking for me. And then I believe we were getting ready to do Los Angeles, and Rob said that you might be looking for somebody. I think I reached out to you and came out with my then girlfriend, now my wife, and the rest is history.
Yeah, so you've seen the evolution of these events, and you always used to joke that you were the token hospitality person, because remember, well, we've been doing this year will be 40 years since our first event in Boston, but I mean, in 2024. But when you came, we had shifted and really started to partner with the Major Cities Chiefs Association, because in that period, 1913, 1914, 1915, a lot of the focus around nightlife was really around public safety and policing and everything else.
Sure.
And so we were able to partner with the Major Cities Chiefs Association, and that helped us to get more police participation. And back in 2015 in LA, that was probably around 40% of our participants came from that policing perspective. And a lot of our program was around that. But you always joke that you were the hospitality representative. But
Mhm.
over the years, I think New York is a good example of how that shifted in some ways, and we didn't even have as much police as we did in New York as other types of people, planners and city managers and code compliance people, and you had state alcohol regulators and obviously various associations, and in particular, the music venue perspective with NEVA, and their members. And Ariel did a great job of putting together a panel with women who were leading the nightlife industry in New York City, and they were restaurant operators, they were nightclub operators, they were promoters, and it really showed that the evolution of enthusiasm and interest in being a part of the solution and being
Mhm.
at the table changed from 2015. But from your own perspective, what changes have you seen? Because you've been to all of them.
Mhm.
Have you witnessed in terms of content, programming, enthusiasm, types of cities that are participating?
I think it's really interesting that, if you think about, where we were 2015 in Los Angeles, if I'm not mistaken, I believe there was really only one office that had been created, and it wasn't even created through any of the work that RHI had done. It was created through a need in the city, and that was the executive director of the nightlife the position that Jocelyn held in San Francisco, where there really was that one position. So it was really more about how do we work with police departments and let police departments understand that we need to understand a better method to manage these districts or manage these venues and police them in a way that isn't interrupting the day-to-day business. And I think with the evolution of this idea behind putting somebody in local government and city government that really can speak to those issues and really understand the importance of that economy, whether it's nighttime, whether it's additional daytime economy that these cities need, you see the expanse and how it actually has transformed over these many years to encompass different aspects of the industry, different parts of the industry. And I think it's really interesting. And yeah, I used to joke because I really was the only operator that I knew of that was willing to come to these events. And it was always a breath of fresh air whenever I'd meet local, come to these events, et cetera, and just make it available. The evolution is really fascinating to me because I think it's morphed from how do we as an organization work with police departments and policing associations and things like that to really talk about safety and management of these areas and things, and now it's evolved to, well, no, this is something that we're all kind of accepting, so let's bring all the stakeholders in here. Let's make sure that the code enforcement people are there. Let's make sure that the electeds are there. Let's make sure PD is there. Let's make sure all of the agencies that you need to successfully help run these districts, if it's a district, or help run these areas of those cities. And I think as people are getting more and more buy-in to this, you're starting to see more stakeholders come to the tables. And I got to be honest with you, I mean, New York set aside, I've seen this trend going back to DC and Philly, where you're starting to see more and more venue operators come to these events to be a part of that, to understand that need behind having a trade association for a voice, to understand, why why you need to organize so that you can be heard as a group. And I think those are all the things that we're kind of seeing as a byproduct of the work that RHI has done all these years.
Yeah. Now, New York City is, like you said, probably in terms of an organized group, the San Francisco Entertainment Commission was kind of the one group that kind of depicted a model. although informally, with Allison in San Diego and other people throughout the country, you had, in fact, I just got off an interview with Josh Levin, who was the coordinator from the DC Hospitality Resource Panel, which was formed in 2000, 2001, way before you heard about the night mayor concept or term. So a lot of these more voluntary ad hoc groups were formed throughout the country. Edmonton, for instance, had Responsible Hospitality Edmonton, which was an office in the city that had staff, and they developed interagency teams, and really one of the most progressive cities. That was 2006, 2007, 2008. So there was a lot of this starting. And then I think, Mirek coming from Amsterdam with the term night mayor kind of launched that concept. But New York kind of got on board, and in fact, it was in Austin. The New York council member came to Austin, and then later to New Orleans, as he was beginning to look at establishing this legislation, which was put together. And it really kind of, I always talk about New York's model as a three-legged stool. You have the Office of Nightlife, you have the Hospitality Alliance, and then you have the advisory board that, is there. I'm not really sure what it does, but at least it creates that community focus. So you've got the government focus, the community focus, and the industry focus, and it's these three entities that share a common goal of recognizing hospitality. In fact, even your speaker, the New York chief of operations police representative in New York, commented that nightlife is a right, and that it's up to the city to protect it, which I would imagine wouldn't have been what you heard from police back when you were operating your venues in the first phase.
No.
So how has this office and the association and the advisory board and, Ariel did an incredible job of creating interagency working groups, developing innovative programs for mitigating sound, even drawing attention to the mental health of hospitality workers during COVID. There were so many things that evolved. I mean, would you have ever imagined that this kind of a government body would have been able to be the convener and the facilitator of so many things?
Would I have imagined it, when I first started this work and really became an activist? No, because that was the furthest thing from it. We were just trying to get a seat at the table. But I think things become more realistic and more based on reality. Now, it's interesting that you lump New York City as this three-tiered monster or this three-tiered system. And it's interesting to me that the way in which the tiers started, the first need was a group of organized owners and operators getting together and basically saying, we're not going to listen to somebody who doesn't understand our needs. We're going to go out on our own and we're going to do our own thing, and we're going to do it the right way. And, I would have to say that the New York City Hospitality Alliance was probably one of the loudest voices during the pandemic, not only just on a citywide level, but on a national level as well. Then if you take a look at the office and how it was created and why it was created, it came at the time when Espinal was actually looking at getting a bunch of things off the books, one of which was the cabaret laws, which was kind of left over from Jim Crow era, making it very difficult for non-white owners and operators to operate their business. That's why it was originally created and then ultimately morphed into the dancing law. So we got rid of that. But we also created this office, and this office, really did, like you said, did a great job of just kind of linking all the pieces. Now, as part of the legislation to kind of keep everybody in check, the committee was created, and this committee was created as a way to just kind of make sure that ideas are being presented, that they work with the executive director for the Office of Night, coming up with either new initiatives or new programs or things like that. And a lot of what they had to submit had to be presented to City Council. I know that. But it does seem to be working, and it does seem to work. These offices will always work provided that they are written into law so that they're protected and that they're not some sort of whim of a political, event where oh, nope, this wasn't under my watch, I'm going to get rid of this office. We don't want that. But if cities really start to understand the importance of this, and I think when you look at, especially when you look at downtowns, and if you look at, outdoor spaces and reimagining, reusing urban spaces as for social gatherings and things like that. I mean, if you take a look at the breadth of the social economy and what that drives and what that brings to a city, if you're just going out drinking, yeah, that might be one thing. But if you think about the cab that you have to take, or the restaurant that you have to go to, or maybe you're staying in a hotel that night, all these things add up to taxes and revenue and jobs and all these other things that need, businesses and cities need. So in my opinion, I just think it's, would I have ever thought back then? No. But 2, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, right before New Orleans, when we're talking, we can see the evolution of it. Yeah, I was hoping that we were going to get to this point. So it is a really, really nice refresher to see it.
That's good. So just to get to the final question here, you've been active with RHI on the board, and you've seen the organization evolve and grow. And obviously I played a significant role. But at some point, my role is going to go away. How do you see the organization and what its value is, and what's going to perpetuate the work that's been done into new uncharted areas and new ground?
It's interesting, Jim, and this is something that we speak about at the board meetings quite often now, something that we talk about on a regular basis. When you started this work, you were the only game in town. There really was no competition. Out of the work that you've done came others, and they kind of saw what RHI was doing. And so all of a sudden, RHI has competition. We might not be the only one responding to an RFP, whereas probably 10 years ago, it was probably 95% certain that we'd be the only one responding. But if you take a look at the different organizations that are out there and what they offer, to me, the unique skill, the unique benefit of working with an organization like RHI is the ability to pull all of the stakeholders together and come up with actual comprehensive, strategic strategies for policies, strategies for implementation, where everybody's involved in the process. And I don't believe anybody else who's looking at doing this work does it to the capacity that RHI does. And I truly believe that as more and more cities come on, now they might contact RHI because uptick in shootings, or there's an uptick in larcenies, or there's an uptick in violence, or whatever the case may be. Or maybe you've got a couple of electeds that actually can just see the forest through the trees, look a little bit ahead in the distance and say, we need to get ahead of this because this is going to come up and bite us on the tuchus if we're not careful. So those are the things that I think, more and more cities are becoming and getting on board and doing. And I think where RHI really, really has established themselves, and I truly believe that RHI's future in this is not only continually bringing stakeholders together, but creating 2 things. Number one, data. We have the ability to collect data. We have the ability to use the data. We have the ability to do economic impact studies for cities. I think that would be a great thing for RHI because we understand that process better than anything. And it's something I think we should offer. And 2, how do we create content for people to archive and access, whether it's through some sort of paid subscription or whatever, that they're going to find valuable and reasonable? The life's work that you've done, the interviews, et cetera, et cetera. I think those going forward are going to be an incredible benefit to anybody looking for that type of information. And I'll say this too, I've seen an evolution in the board. I've seen a big evolution in the board, Jim, from the first board meeting you asked me to attend to in DC. And that and it's a much more active board. The members that are still on it really do care about the organization. We really do care about you. And we just have a love affair to try to make sure that whatever it is, that whatever path RHI is going to take in the future, that it does so from a place of solvency, and it does so from a place of actually being able to not only own content, own data, but become a resource for municipalities who are very much interested in setting up these offices and these organizations.
All right. Well, this has been a great interview. You have a long legacy, and you in and of yourself have
Thank you.
made a significant contributions worldwide, clearly, because of your representation of the work in New York, your participation in our events, and our participation together, and also the ones that you were involved with in Columbia and Ibiza and other gatherings of nightlife representatives. So congratulations too on your work, Paul. And
Thank
it's been
you.
great having this alliance and this partnership. And this has been a
Absolutely.
great historic overview. And it really points out, I just did an interview with Josh Levin, who became the coordinator for the HRP, and he owned 3 restaurants in DC. And the first time he came to a meeting with residents and police and regulators, he came in there with a very hostile attitude that you guys are only out to close us down, you know? And he began to realize when he started to listen that everybody had their own stories, and that he had to listen to the other stories in order for them to understand his. And I think that's what you said happened in New York. Is it's you had this, they're out to close us down, but maybe because you weren't at the table to explain the value and the benefits that you brought and the work that you were trying to do, that you were able to get others to recognize that you could become a valuable partner and actually bring about a lot of information and ideas. So I think that's a good lesson that you bring and that Josh brought for anybody who's an operator. You could stay in your own little space and complain about how everybody is out to get you, or you can become more engaged and be a part of advocating for your and the industry's interests and really make significant change happen. So I think you deserve a lot of credit too, Paul, and congratulations. And was a great interview. And I
Thanks,
thank you for taking the time and look forward to
Paul.
continuing to work with you.
Absolutely. Anytime, Jim.
Okay.